My name is Corinne Ashby, and I am 61 years old. 19 days before my fire department stood me up on a stage for 35 years of service, my daughter called to tell me she'd be at the lake instead. She said it the way you'd mention a dentist appointment you weren't even planning to keep. Her husband's family owns a cabin on Flathead Lake, and the week they'd booked ran straight over the Saturday my name was finally going to be read out loud, in front of a camera. So I gave her seat to someone else. I gave it to the daughter of the woman who trained me, my best friend, honestly, the best one I ever had, who died 4 years ago and never once got her name said out loud in that building. What happened on the news that night? That's not the part that still catches in my throat. What my daughter offered me, 17 minutes before we walked out under those lights, that's the part one have never told a single soul. Until right now. If you're new here, this channel is where we talk about the things families don't say at the dinner table. The favor nobody asked for out loud. The debt nobody calls a debt. The chair that sits empty so long, you stop even noticing it's empty. If any part of this sounds like your own kitchen, tell me in the comments. And stay through to the end, because there's a piece of this I'm still not sure I did right. The call came on a Tuesday evening in late May, right around 7, while I was rinsing a pan at the sink with a towel slung over my shoulder. It was the third time I'd said the date out loud to my daughter, Marlo, and I'd started to hear how that sounded, so I kept my voice easy. She said the name of the lake before she said anything else. Flathead. The Averys go up every July, 6 hours from my front door, and my son-in-law's mother, Diane, pays for the whole thing. By now it's just weather in that family. Something that happens whether anyone likes it or not. I asked if there was any way to shift it, even by a couple days. Marlo laughed, not unkindly. Mom, the cabin's already booked. It would be so awkward to back out on everyone. Behind her I heard a woman's voice, smooth and unbothered, the voice of somebody used to running a room without ever having to raise it. Tell her we'll send something special. That was Diane. In 11 years, she has never once spoken to me sharply. She's never had to. I said, of course. I have said of course to supervisors at 3 in the morning, to my ex-husband's lawyer, to a battalion chief who once threw a radio clean across a garage bay. It leaves my mouth before I've even decided to say it, and by the time I hear it, it's already become the truth. We talked about bug spray. We talked about whether my son-in-law's shoulder had healed. I dried the same pan twice. What I didn't say, what I couldn't say, was that at 9 that morning, in a conference room on the second floor of the station I'd worked out of since 1990, a woman named Priscilla You'd had asked me to come back Monday. And bring my glasses. Here's what 35 years looks like from where I stood. I started as a rookie paramedic in the spring of 1990, 23 years old, paying off my EMT certification with money I'd made waitressing double shifts at a truck stop outside Missoula. Most of those years I rode the overnight rig, which everyone just called the graveyard, and honestly, nobody had to explain why twice. My husband left in 1998, when Marlo was 5, and I raised her on a schedule where I was asleep before she got home from school, and gone again before she went to bed. I made up the difference the only way I knew how, money. My hip started going around 2021. The left one's worse. I've put off the surgery 3 separate times, twice because of staffing shortages, once because the deductible landed the same month as a transmission repair. My pension pays out at $2,650 a month. I still owe $58,000 on a home equity loan I took out in pieces over the years, some for Marlo's wedding, some for a semester of nursing school she didn't finish, some for what I called the cushion, because that sounded a whole lot gentler than the truth. Every month, for 6 years, on the first, $550 has left my account and landed in hers. Her car payment, her phone bill, the cushion. I never once asked for it back. I never brought it up, not at a single holiday, not even when my roof started leaking. I thought that silence was a virtue. I thought it was the whole shape of who I was. It took me until this June to understand what you actually teach a person, when you never once say out loud that you need something. I met Josephine Whitcomb, everybody called her Jo, in the fall of 1991, on an overnight shift nobody else wanted. She was 2 years older than me, maybe 4 inches shorter, and she taught me how to lift a patient without wrecking my back, which, trust me, is a skill. And how to tell a family the truth in a hospital hallway, which is a whole different skill, and a much harder one. We were partners and best friends for 32 years. She had a laugh you could hear straight through a closed door. When her husband left in 2003, she moved into a rental behind the Lutheran church and never once complained about it out loud. When I couldn't afford after-school care, she took Marlo 2 afternoons a week and taught her how to braid bread dough. Jo was diagnosed in the winter of 2021 and died the following October, 59 years old, in a hospital bed 2 floors above the one where we'd first met on shift together. I went back to work 3 days after the funeral. Everyone told me that was strength. It wasn't strength. It was the only place left where my hands still knew what to do, without me having to ask them. She used to have a line, for people who sent flowers instead of showing up. Or a card instead of showing up. Or some real nice gift basket instead of showing up. She'd look at the basket, then look at me, and say, anybody can send something, course showing up is the whole thing. Her daughter, Sable, still works in the same building, dispatch desk now, answering phones and filing insurance faxes nobody ever calls back about. She takes the long hallway, so she doesn't have to pass the ambulance bay. I'd walked past that girl probably 300 times over the last 4 years. And standing at my sink that evening, towel still on my shoulder, I realized I had not once asked her a real question. Not one, in all that time. Priscilla Yude runs the department's charitable foundation, and Foster Lang is the attorney who handles their gift agreements. Monday morning, they were both sitting in that conference room, which told me something before either one of them even opened their mouth. Priscilla started with a name I hadn't thought about in years. Walter Renfro. February of 1999. A structure fire. A man pulled out of a collapsing stairwell with maybe 90 seconds to spare. He's 82 now. He sold his lumber company back in 2018, and his family had decided to make a gift to the department, in my name. Priscilla put the number on the table, no ceremony at all. $1 million. I heard the air handler kick on. I heard my own pulse, which, after 3 decades on a rig, is a sound I recognize the way other people recognize their own car engine. Then she explained the part that actually mattered. The family had left the whole shape of the gift up to me. I could pour it all into a named endowment. I'd pick the name, I'd pick the first recipient, and after that, it would fund somebody new, every single year. Or, the family would cut a personal check for $250,000 straight into my retirement, and the endowment simply wouldn't exist. Foster said the paperwork had to be signed and sealed by that Thursday, and the envelope would be opened live on stage Saturday, because the local news was covering it, and the Renfros wanted the reveal to land on camera. I told him that was an awful lot of theater for a paramedic. He didn't smile. He said it was their money, and they'd like the evening to feel like something. I made it as far as the parking lot before I thought of my niece. I made it as far as my car before I thought of my daughter. It still bothers me that it came in that order. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and finally did the math I'd been avoiding since 2021. $250,000 pays off the $58,000. It covers the left hip in September, probably the right one by spring. It covers the 6 weeks off afterward that nobody ever budgets for. It means I stop working overnights at 61 instead of 66. It means the roof, finally, and a water heater that doesn't groan like it's clearing its throat. I wrote the figures out longhand, because I think better with a pen in my hand. Then a second thought slid in, quiet, clean, and sat itself right down next to the first one. If I told Marlo there was $1 million attached to that Saturday, she would come. I didn't have to wonder about it. I knew it the way you know your own staircase in the dark. She'd move the cabin trip, or fly back for one night, or the Averys would suddenly discover the dates weren't so fixed after all, and there'd be a photograph of the two of us under that plaque, and everyone would say what a lovely family we were. I sat with that thought a long while. My fridge hummed on and off. I did not like the woman who'd had that idea, and I could not get her to leave the table. Worse than that, she sounded so reasonable. I closed the notebook. I didn't call anybody. I went to bed and lay there doing the only math I had left in me, which was 6 years of first-of-the-month transfers, and I stopped myself before I reached the total, because some numbers, you already know by heart. That Sunday I drove the 90 minutes to my daughter's for dinner, the way I do once a month, mostly because I wanted to watch her face when the lake trip came up. The Avery house sits behind a stone wall with lights strung along the driveway. The table seats 10. There are cloth napkins on an ordinary Sunday night. Diane met me at the door with both hands out, told me I looked well-rested, which is basically her version of hello. My son-in-law, Colton, carved the roast. He just made regional sales director, the kind of promotion that comes easy when your last name's already on the building, and he said it with such uncomplicated joy. Honestly, it was hard to hold against him. Colton has never once had an unkind thought in his life. He's also never had an inconvenient one. Marlo poured the wine and talked about the lake the way people talk about jury duty, an obligation she'd already made her peace with. I noticed a thin gold bracelet on her wrist, the kind where you can't even guess the price. Diane said the thing she always says, resting one palm flat on the tablecloth. We take care of our people, Corinne. She means it. Completely. And that's exactly what makes it work on everyone, including me. Later, over pie, Marlo mentioned Diane had covered the down payment on their house back in 2020, tossed off the way you'd mentioned borrowing a ladder from a neighbor. And I understood I was hearing about it 4 years late, because it had honestly never crossed anyone's mind that I'd want to know. On her way to the kitchen, she patted my shoulder. You'll be fine, Mom. You're always fine. I drove home in the dark with the radio off and somewhere past the county line, I understood, she wasn't being cruel. She was reading a chart. The exact chart I had spent 28 years writing myself. That Tuesday, Priscilla emailed the seating chart. Honorees get 2 seats at the head table, and mine were printed on a single sheet in a font somebody picked to look like handwriting. Seat 1A, Corinne Ashby, Paramedic Division. Seat 2A, blank. She needed the second name by Friday, for the place card. I drafted 3 different replies, and sent none of them. I told myself there was still time, which is exactly what you say when you've already quietly decided to wait around for a person to become someone else. I printed the chart anyway and stuck it to my fridge, under a magnet from my brother's plumbing company. And every time I opened that door for milk, there it was. My name, and an empty rectangle right beside it. It occurred to me that I'd been holding a seat open for that girl since she turned 19. The Thanksgiving she went to a boyfriend's family instead. The Christmas she had the flu and then posted a photo from a ski lift 2 days later. My 60th birthday, which we ended up celebrating in August, because July hadn't worked out. I never once made a scene about any of it. I want you to understand, I didn't file those away as grievances. I filed them as weather, and I thought of myself as somebody with a good coat. It was only once that chair had a number stamped on it, a real, printed 2A, that I started counting. And counting. That's a dangerous thing to start at 61. Because the total comes fast, and once you have it, you can't just put it back in the drawer. So on Wednesday, I did something I have genuinely never done in my life. I called my daughter and told her, out loud, plain words, that the ceremony mattered to me. and that I would personally cover the change fees so she and Colton could fly back Saturday morning and be at the cabin again by Sunday night. I'd already called the airline. $690 for the pair, confirmation number written on the same legal pad as my arithmetic. There was a pause on the line, and in it I heard a screen door somewhere behind her, which meant she'd stepped outside, which meant Diane was still in the room. Then she said, "Mom, Diane already paid the deposit. It would be rude to just leave." I told her the cabin doesn't know whether she's in it or not. She said that wasn't the point, and she was right, it wasn't. And neither of us said out loud what the actual point was. Then she brightened, because she isn't a hard person. She's a managed one. "We'll do something special for you in August. Something really nice." I said that sounded lovely. Something. That word again. In that family, something always comes wrapped. It shows up by courier with a card in somebody's careful handwriting, and nobody ever has to change a single plan to send it. I found Sable the next afternoon on the back stairwell, eating a sandwich straight out of a grocery bag, badge turned around backward on its lanyard. She jumped when the door opened. I told her I was hiding too, which was half true, and sat down on the step below her, because my hip won't take the same step twice in a row. She's got her mother's hands, same short nails, same way of holding food like it might get up and walk off. I asked how long she'd been eating lunch on these stairs. Since she moved to dispatch, she said, real light, in the voice you use for something you've already decided isn't worth minding out loud. She'd been in the paramedic program at community college, and withdrew in the winter of 2021, 6 weeks after her mother's diagnosis, because somebody had to drive her to appointments twice a week. She's 28 now. She answers phones and files prior authorizations for people who never call back. Clipped inside her lanyard, half hidden, was her mother's old shift badge, the plastic worn soft at the corners. She saw me notice it and covered it with her hand, not embarrassed, just protective. In 4 years, that girl has not asked this department for a single thing. Not a shift swap. Not a favor. Not a reference letter. I asked if she still had her old textbooks. In a bin in her closet, she said, and then added they were outdated editions now, in a voice trying real hard to sound like a joke, and not quite landing it. I went back to my desk afterward and didn't chart a single thing for 4 full minutes. Priscilla called Friday about the deadline, and I let her get all the way through the reminder before I finally asked the question I'd been rehearsing in my car. Could I name my daughter as the recipient? I tried to make it sound casual. I even laughed a little at the end, the way you do when you want a question to be able to leave the room without you attached to it. Priscilla didn't laugh, but she didn't hesitate either. Yes. The honoree can designate anyone. It can be a named award, tuition and stipend, whatever terms you'd like built around that person. The family's left the choice entirely to you. There was a silence while I wrote nothing down on my pad. Then I heard myself ask the second question, the one I'd take back if I could. I asked whether the announcement would be public. She said yes, Liv, that was the whole idea. I said, right, of course, thanked her, and hung up. I sat in my car in the back lot with my keys in my lap. I want to be honest about what happened in that car, because it's the only way any of the rest of this actually means anything. I wasn't weighing whether my daughter deserved $1 million. I was calculating whether $1 million, announced live on television in front of 300 people, would be enough to get her into a chair. That's a completely different question. That's not a mother's question at all. And it arrived in my own voice, easy, no effort whatsoever. I want to pause here, because this is the part I've never told anyone before this video. I sat in a fire station parking lot and did the actual arithmetic on what it would cost to make my own child show up. If you've ever done that math for a son, a daughter, a sibling, tell me in the comments. I would genuinely like to know I'm not the only one who's done it. And if this is landing with you at all, hit subscribe, because there's more to this story, and I promise you, it gets harder before it gets better. My brother Grady came out that Saturday to look at my water heater, which had been dying slowly and politely since 2022. He's 56, does plumbing for a living, and he's the one person alive who remembers me at 9 years old. He got the pilot light relit, then sat on my back porch with a cup of coffee while I told him about the $250,000, because I tell Grady things. He went real still, then said the sensible thing he always says. Take the 250. Fix your hips. Don't make it a whole production. I told him nobody had said anything about a production. He turned his mug in his hands, and then, because he genuinely thought it was funny, because he thought it was just a story about how kids are these days, he mentioned Marlo had called him back in March and asked, somewhere in the conversation, whether there was money attached to Mom's thing. He said it with a little laugh at the end, waiting for me to laugh along. I looked out at my yard, which needed mowing, and understood, the one person in this family who was supposed to be in my corner had just told me to keep quiet. And in the same breath, handed me the exact reason I couldn't. I called Marlo that Sunday, under the cover of asking about the weather up at the lake. She was in a grocery store. I could hear the register beeping behind her. We did the kind of small talk we're good at, the kind where nobody has to actually look at anyone. Then she said, in the lightest voice she owns, "Hey, so Uncle Grady mentioned something about your work thing. Is it like a bonus or something?" And there it was, out in the open air of a checkout line, 400 miles away. Something happens to me in the seconds right after a question like that. My pulse drops instead of spikes. It's been doing that since 1994, when a teenager came off a highway and the whole rig went loud, and I found out exactly what kind of animal I actually am under pressure. So my voice stayed perfectly level. "It's a plaque, honey." She said that was nice, asked if there'd be a dinner, and I said chicken or fish, same as always. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone and realized I had just lied to my daughter for the first time in 28 years. Not a soft lie. Not the Santa Claus kind, or the your haircut looks great kind. A hard, deliberate, load-bearing lie, told to protect a number. I told myself I was protecting her from the temptation. That wasn't true either. I was protecting myself from finding out exactly how fast she'd move, if she knew the real one. The banquet hall at the station's community center is a plain room with a bad ceiling and a decent floor, and on the Monday before, they were setting it up early because a retirement party had the space booked the following weekend. I went down on my break, telling myself I was checking the ramp clearance for Mr. Renfro, since he uses a walker now. That wasn't why I went. The linens were only half laid. 2 men were unrolling a section of dance floor. The head table sat empty on its low riser, skirting already pinned, chairs pushed in tight the way banquet chairs always are, facing the table instead of the room. Mine had a card, Seat 1A, my name in that fake handwriting font, and beside it, Seat 2A, with a blank card lying face up on the cloth. I stood there long enough that one of the setup crew asked if I needed anything. I said no. Then I walked around the end of the table and put both hands on the back of that second chair. I didn't take it away. I've thought a lot about why not, and the honest answer is I couldn't. Not that day. What I did instead was turn it, pulled it out and swung it a quarter turn, so it faced the room instead of the table. Not a place set for somebody who'd promised to come. Just a chair, open, facing whoever might actually walk through that door. It looked wrong sitting like that. Looked like a mistake somebody would fix before Saturday. I left it exactly that way and went back upstairs to finish my shift, and for the rest of that week, in every quiet moment, I kept seeing that chair, turned out toward an empty room. Joe would have had exactly one sentence for it, delivered while staring at a flower arrangement. Anybody can send something, of course showing up is the whole thing. Diane called me directly that same evening, which she hadn't done in over a year. Her voice comes down a phone line like something poured slow, out of a pitcher. She asked about my hip before anything else, and she remembered which one, and that's not an act, that's a discipline, and it deserves to be respected as exactly what it is. Then she got to the point. Marlo was exhausted, she said. Working full-time, managing a kitchen remodel, carrying more than anyone realized. We just try to take some of the weight off her, Corinne. That's all we've ever done. I told her I wasn't asking anyone to carry anything. She said gently that of course I wasn't, I never do, and something in exactly how she said it raised the hair on my arms. Then she offered to send an arrangement to the ceremony, from a florist she likes in Missoula. White, or something with color. She'd have it there by 4. My name on the card, Marlo's name, Colton's, all 3, so the table wouldn't look empty. I said white was fine. That phrase is the one I still turn over at 2 in the morning. So the table wouldn't look empty. Not so it wouldn't be empty. She wasn't lying to me. In her mind, she was solving the actual problem in front of her, which was optics, and she was solving it generously, with her own money, on short notice. When I hung up, I sat with the fact that this woman had known the exact date of my ceremony for months. Same as everybody else in that family. Sable caught me by the elevator the next morning, apologizing before she'd even asked, wondering if I'd write her a recommendation letter. The department has a small tuition assistance award for support staff, $2,000, applications due in August. She had the old folder with her from her first attempt back in 2021, because they want original transcripts, and hers had never been returned. She handed it to me and went to answer a phone. I opened it in the break room. Transcripts, a photocopied certification card, a personal statement written by a 23-year-old who'd used the word dedicated twice. And folded into quarters underneath all of it, soft at the creases, a page of shift trades, in Joe's handwriting. 6 weeks of overnights she'd swapped away, so her daughter could sit in a classroom on Tuesday mornings. I know that handwriting better than my own mother's. She crossed her 7s with a little bar through the middle. I sat in that break room with the vending machine humming and someone's burnt popcorn smell still hanging in the microwave, and I didn't cry, because I don't do that at work, and 30 years in that building has made that a matter of professional posture more than feeling. I put the page back exactly where I'd found it. Then I looked at the award amount again. $2,000 doesn't cover a semester. Doesn't cover half of one. It's the kind of number that lets an institution feel like it did something, and it's nobody's fault, but it still isn't enough. My left hip finally gave out that same afternoon, 40 minutes into a routine call. I was crouched at a patient's side, and when I went to stand, the joint just refused to take my weight. I didn't go down. Got a hand on the gurney rail, finished the transfer without dropping anything, and the call went fine, but afterward I sat in the back of the rig with my legs straight out, and my heart doing that same slow thing again. My supervisor, Denise Farrow, crouched in front of me. She's run our division for 6 years, and she's real good at her job, which meant she didn't ask if I was okay. She looked at the leg and said she was pulling me off the truck through the end of the month. I told her I could still do desk coverage. She said no. Corinne, I am not going to be the one who lets you finish 35 years on a stretcher. She meant it kindly. It was the kindest thing anyone did for me that whole month, and it still knocked the floor out from under me, because standing on that rig is the only argument I've ever made for my own worth. Not talking. Not asking. Standing. That night, I lay on my couch with a bag of frozen peas on my hip, and the foundation's designation form on my lap. 1 line for the fund's name, 1 line for the first recipient. I stared at that second line a long time. Then I got up, which took a while, and went to my kitchen drawer, and I didn't reach for a pen. I wrote my daughter's name in pencil, Marlo Avery, on the recipient line, using the same mechanical pencil I keep for crossword puzzles. I told myself it was just so I could look at it. That's what I said out loud, to an empty living room, to nobody, which should have told me something, all by itself. And it did look good. I have to admit that part. It looked like a photograph that hadn't been taken yet, the two of us under the plaque, her hand on my arm, her face doing the thing it does when a camera finds it, some caption underneath about a mother and daughter and 35 years. It looked like the end of a very long argument I'd been having with myself since 1998, about whether I'd done any of this right. I left the form on the table and went to bed. In the morning I walked right past it with my coffee. That night I ate standing at the counter and walked past it again. For 2 full days, that form sat there with my daughter's name in graphite, and I neither erased it nor inked it over, and both days I told myself I was still thinking. I wasn't thinking. I was waiting to find out if wanting something bad enough could make it clean. I want you to know that about me before the rest of this happens, because there's a version of this story where I'm the sensible one, and everyone else is greedy, and that version's a lie, and I've got no use for it anymore. It was Colton who accidentally showed me the truth, and he did it out of pure friendliness, which is the only way anything true has ever made it to me in that family. He wanted my grandmother's stuffing recipe, and while he was at it, he shared their family calendar with me, so I could see when they'd be back and pick a weekend to visit. I opened it on my phone at the dispatch desk on a Wednesday. 10 days blocked out in pale green. Flathead, Avery. And underneath, in the gray text those calendars used to log everything, created January 9th. I sat and stared at that date. I had told them about the ceremony over pie, at my own kitchen table. In December, I'd watched Marlo type it straight into her phone while I sat right there. 3 weeks later, somebody in that family picked a 10-day window and laid it right on top of my Saturday. Wasn't a scheduling conflict. Nobody double-booked anything. There was nothing on that lake that had to happen that particular week. A cabin got chosen, and dates got chosen, and my ceremony was simply one of the things those dates rolled straight over, the way you feel a pothole through your tires and don't even bother slowing down for it. I didn't call her that day. I wanted to be sure I could keep my voice exactly where I keep it. An hour later, I called Marlo and asked one flat question, the way you'd ask a scheduler. When did you all book the cabin? There was a silence on that line I will hear for the rest of my life. And then, for the length of about one held breath, my daughter told me the truth. Mom, they're the ones who actually show up for us. That was the whole sentence. No defense stapled to the front of it, no cushion on the back. It came out the way things come out when they've been sitting behind someone's teeth for a couple of years. Then she heard herself say it and started rebuilding the wall, fast, neat, the way you'd expect from somebody who works in marketing. They'd already committed. Colton's cousins were flying in from Denver. It was the only week the whole family could line up. Every sentence she gave me was true. Every sentence was also a brick. By the end of it, she was explaining to me why I should feel good about the whole arrangement, and she finished the way she always finishes. You'll be fine, Mom. You're always fine. I said, okay, honey, and let her go. And I stood in my hallway, understanding something I hadn't expected. She was right. They are the ones who show up for her, cabin, deposit, job title, down payment, every summer, on schedule, and nobody ever has to be asked twice. What I actually lost that morning wasn't my daughter. It was the version of this story where she was innocent. That evening I pulled 6 years of bank statements. Honestly, I'm not even sure what I thought I was looking for. Something to be angry about, probably. Anger's a real tidy room, and I wanted somewhere to go stand. What I found instead was my own handwriting all over the walls. $550 a month, on the 1st, since June of 2018. 72 transfers. $39,600. Then the wedding in October of 2019, $28,000, the venue, the band, the dress. A semester of nursing school in 2021 that stopped in November. New tires in the winter of 2020. First month and deposit on her first apartment, back in 2016. I lined it all up in a column on the back of an envelope, and the floor genuinely went out from under me. I had been telling myself a story about a wealthy woman buying my daughter away from me. It's a good story. Has a villain in Kashmir, and it lets me be the one who got robbed. But that column on the envelope, that wasn't theft. It was a bid. That's all it ever was. Every month, on the 1st, for 6 straight years, I put money down on a chair at my own daughter's table, and I never once said out loud that's what I was doing. Neither did she. So we both got to keep pretending it was love. Diane hadn't outshined me. She'd outbid me. And the reason I couldn't see it till that evening is, I'd been sitting in that auction so long, I'd genuinely mistaken it for family. At 20 minutes to midnight that Wednesday, I logged into my bank on a laptop with a cracked hinge, found the standing transfer, and canceled it. Takes almost nothing. Confirmation screen asks if you're sure, there's a button. I texted Marlo right after, because I wasn't gonna let her find out from a declined charge. I kept it plain, no accusations. Told her I was stopping the transfer on the 1st. Told her it wasn't a punishment. Told her the true part, which was, I couldn't keep paying rent on a seat anymore. Then I turned my phone face down and went to bed, slept straight through till my alarm, which scared me more than anything else that whole week, because it meant some part of me had been standing guard over that $550 for 6 years, without once telling the rest of me it was doing it. If you're still with me, I know some of you are thinking about your own bank app right now. That standing transfer with somebody's name attached to it. I'm not telling you to cancel yours. I'm only telling you what it cost me to cancel mine, and what came back afterward. Stay to the end for that part. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe if this is landing with you, because, trust me, it gets harder before it gets better. My phone lit up 9 minutes after I sent that text, and it did not stop. Colton called first, around 7 the next morning, not angry, just genuinely bewildered, which honestly, is worse. He kept saying he didn't understand what had changed. Grady texted that I was making things worse, that this wasn't like me, and he was right, it wasn't, and that was rather the point. Marlo sent a long message, then a short one, then went quiet. And before 10 that morning, Diane left a voicemail. Never raised her voice, not once. I no longer think she's even capable of it. Said she was disappointed. Said whatever was happening between me and my daughter, pulling money out from under a young couple over hurt feelings was, and I'm quoting her exactly here, beneath me. Then, right when she should have hung up, she kept talking. Told me her own mother had spent the last year of her life in a county facility outside Kalispell, because back in 1999, Deanne hadn't had the money to move her somewhere better. Said she used to drive up on Sundays and sit in a room that smelled like bleach, listening to a woman apologize for being a burden. Her voice went thin, for about a second and a half. Nobody sends flowers to a woman who can't afford the vase, she said. Then it smoothed right back over, and she thanked me for my time and hung up. I sat in my kitchen holding the phone a long while. I understood her completely, and I did not forgive her, not even a little, and I've learned those two things can live in a person at the exact same time, no trouble whatsoever. Thursday morning, I took an eraser to my daughter's name. Lifted clean, the way pencil does, leaving a faint dent where the graphite had pressed in, and I didn't write anything in its place. Then I went down to the back stairwell at 11, and sat on the step below Sable while she ate her sandwich out of a grocery bag. Asked what she was doing Saturday the 20th, working dispatch till 3, she said. Why? I told her the department was giving me a plaque, and there'd be a dinner, and the honorees get 2 seats, and I'd like her to take the second one. She stopped chewing. Then she asked the question I hadn't seen coming, looking straight at me with her mother's exact face on. Are you sure you don't want to save it? I said no, fast enough to surprise us both. Told her it wasn't a saved seat. It was a chair, and somebody should actually be sitting in it. She said yes. Then admitted she didn't own a dress, in the voice of somebody throwing up an obstacle early, so it can't be used against her later. I told her to find one. By Friday she'd borrowed a navy dress off a coworker, 2 sizes too big, safety pinned the back herself. I never told her about the envelope. Not a hint. I want that on the record, because of what people said afterward. That girl walked into that room Saturday night believing she was there for a plaque and some chicken, and nothing more than that. At 3 on Thursday, I sat down in that same second-floor conference room with Priscilla and Foster, and a form with 2 blank lines on it. I wrote the fund's name first, the Josephine Whitcomb Paramedic Scholarship. Had to spell her last name for the notary, Whitcombe, and my hand stayed steady, and I was glad about that, in a small, mean way I'm not proud of. On the second line I wrote Sable Whitcomb, and beside it, in the box for terms Priscilla had already drafted, it read, full tuition and a living stipend through certification, support and clerical staff eligible thereafter, 1 recipient a year, in perpetuity. Then Foster slid the second document across, the one for the personal distribution, and I signed the line declining it. $250,000, gone, in the time it takes to write your own name. My hip's gonna get paid for the ordinary way, in installments, at an interest rate I wouldn't repeat in front of company. Priscilla sealed the designation into an envelope right in front of me and initialed the flap, said the Renfros would love it, and she meant that. Foster stayed behind another minute. He's about 60, and he's got a lawyer's way of saying the most important things with almost no weight on them at all. You should know the practical piece, he said. Any time before that envelope opens on camera, you tell me, and it changes. 1 sentence to me is all it takes. I told him I understood. I thanked him. He zipped the envelope into a portfolio. I thought about that 1 sentence every single day after that. Thought about it hardest of all on Saturday, standing in a hallway with an iPad in my hands. Saturday came in hot and bright. The banquet hall held around 300 people, more than I'd expected, and honestly, more than I wanted. By 5, there was a news van in the lot with its mast already up. There were paramedics in that room I trained back in 1997. 2 former EMTs who'd started as teenagers under me and were grandmothers now. Walter Renfro came in on a walker with his son at his elbow, 82 years old, in a tie with little anchors on it, and he took my hand in both of his and said absolutely nothing, which was exactly the right thing to say. The plaque sat under a piece of navy velvet on an easel. Near the door, on a side table, sat a white arrangement, roses and something green, with a card in careful florist's handwriting reading Diane, Colton and Marlowe Avery. It was beautiful. Smelled a little like a funeral home, which, hey, isn't the flowers' fault. Sable came in around 6:05, in her borrowed navy dress, her mother's badge clip pinned inside the collar where nobody could see it but her, and she stopped dead when she saw her name printed at seat 2A, in that same fake handwriting font, chair still turned a quarter out toward the room. She looked at me. Sit down, honey, I said. They're starting on time. I'd put my phone in my locker at 4, the way I have for 35 years straight. At 21 minutes past 6, one of the younger paramedics jogged over with the department tablet and told me my daughter was calling, and it sounded urgent. I stepped into the service hallway by the kitchen, where the light's bad and the dishwasher never stops running. Marlowe's face filled the screen, sunburned across her nose, hair still wet, the cabin's kitchen behind her, sliding door open, someone laughing outside. Diane stood at her shoulder in the frame, composed, hands folded, the way you stand when you already know you're about to be in a photograph. A cousin of Colton's had seen the Foundation's press release online. That's all it took. Marlowe started talking fast, and it wasn't a fight, it was an offer, and it came in stages, the way offers do. They'd leave that night. 6 hours, straight through. Make it back for Sunday dinner. Come for the whole Christmas week this year, not just an afternoon. She was crying by then, and it was real crying, my own child, on a cracked screen in a bad hallway. Then she said the last part. Mom, I'm 10 weeks along. We were gonna tell you in August. She let that sit exactly long enough. Then, put my name on it. It's for your grandchild. I heard the dishwasher switch cycles. Heard, through the wall behind me, 300 people finding their seats and a microphone getting tapped twice. My daughter was offering me every single thing I had wanted since 2013, itemized, deliverable, in exchange for one line on a document sitting in a black portfolio 20 feet from where I stood. Diane leaned very slightly into frame, and her voice came down the line like something poured slow, and she said the truest sentence anyone said to me that entire month. It's just efficient, Corinne. I had maybe 40 seconds. Foster stood at the end of the riser with the portfolio under his arm. I could see him through the pass-through window. One sentence to him, and everything changes. I already knew exactly which sentence. Sat built and ready in my mouth. I thought about my left hip. Thought about $58,000, and a water heater that clears its throat. Thought about a grandchild I hadn't known existed 4 minutes earlier, and a whole 4-day Christmas, and a photograph under a plaque that would have made every hard year finally add up to something. And then I heard the ledger open again. That's the only way I can describe it. The sound of a column starting, except this time I was the one with the high bid, and my daughter was the item, and my grandchild was the interest accruing on the loan. 6 years of first-of-the-month transfers, a wedding, new tires, a chair I'd been paying rent on since she turned 19. Diane hadn't stolen my daughter from me. She'd simply been better funded. In an auction I was the one who'd opened. I understood, standing in a service hallway in a building I'd given my whole adult life to, that if I wrote my daughter's name on that line, I would win her back at the exact price that had cost me her in the first place. And I would keep paying that price, every single year, for the rest of my life. So I said the only thing I had left, and I said it quiet, because I don't raise my voice either. I told Diane she'd been paying my daughter to stay, and I'd been paying her to come home, and we had simply been working with different budgets. Then I said, I'm done bidding. I ended the call, and never said a word to Foster. Set the tablet face down on the steel counter beside a rack of dinner rolls, and walked out into that room, and the entire way to my chair, I could feel my grandchild leaving with the call. At 6:40, the camera light turned red. Priscilla did the introduction, and the Renfro family stood, and Walter said a few words about a February night in 1999 that he doesn't personally remember, though I do. Then she opened the envelope. Read the fund's name first, and I watched it land across the room in a slow wave, front tables to back. The Josephine Whitcomb Paramedic Scholarship, $1 million, in perpetuity, for the EMTs and the dispatchers and the desk staff who never get to finish what they started. There were women in that room who'd worked shifts beside Joe for 20 years, and one of them made a sound I will never forget. Then Priscilla read the name of the first recipient, and Sable Whitcomb did not understand it, not at first. That's the part that ended up in the clip that went around afterward. She sat there with her hands folded in her lap, face completely blank, while the woman next to her started crying. Then it landed, all at once, and she put both hands flat over her mouth and folded forward. I got up. My hip complained, and I let it. I had a card in my pocket with a speech written out, and I never once looked at it. I told that room I had exactly one thing to give this department after 35 years, and it was theirs. Told them my friend Joe had given the exact same thing, and nobody had ever put her name on so much as a plaque, and that was getting corrected tonight. Then I gave them her line, the one she used to say while staring straight at a real nice basket somebody had sent instead of showing up. Anybody can send something. Showing up is the whole thing. I got to my locker around 9:45. The room had emptied out slow, the way those rooms always do. Sable had left with her aunt and a paper plate of cake wrapped in foil, still not quite back in her own body. I turned my phone over, and it took a second to catch up with itself, then started stacking notifications. 94 missed calls. 31 from my daughter. 19 from Colton. 8 from Diane, which for that woman is basically a scream. 20-some from cousins and aunts and numbers I didn't recognize, and a dozen from people I'd worked beside for decades who'd seen the clip online and wanted to say something kind, stuck in line behind everyone else. I sat in my car in the back lot, engine off, dome light off, a bag of ice from the kitchen resting on my hip, and I read the names down that screen the way you'd read a chart. I didn't call anyone back that night, and it wasn't spite. I want to be exact about this, because it's the whole difference. Wasn't that I wanted anyone to feel anything. It was that for the first time in my entire adult life, I did not owe a single person on that list an explanation. For 35 years, I answered every call on the first ring. That night, I let the phone just be a phone. It's the first week of August now. I didn't get rich, and I want to be real clear about that, because people hear $1 million and assume something landed on me. Nothing landed on me. I still owe $58,000. My left hip's scheduled for the second week of October, and I'm paying it off over 36 months, at an interest rate I wouldn't repeat in front of company. I work part-time now, 2 shifts a week, instead of retiring clean, because $2,650 a month is $2,650 a month, and I'm on mornings, off my feet by dinner, and I actually sleep through the night now. Sable started her recertification program in July. Back in her uniform, classroom on Mondays, on the floor Wednesdays, her mother's old badge clip on the outside of her lanyard now, where anyone can see it. She still eats lunch on the back stairs sometimes. I've stopped trying to talk her out of it. Diane sent a card in the middle of July, heavy stock, her own handwriting, gracious as a hostess standing in a doorway. Inside was a check for $550, and a note explaining it would arrive monthly for Marlowe's expenses going forward, so nobody had to feel uncomfortable. I put it right back in the envelope and mailed it straight back to her, no letter of my own. She hasn't written since. She'll own Christmas this year, and probably the one after, and the Averys will rent that same cabin next July, and the July after that, and, honestly, I've made my peace with the actual size of what I'm up against, which was never one woman in Kashmir. It's a whole different tax bracket of love, and I can't outbid it, and I've finally stopped trying to. Marlowe and I text now. It's thin, and it's polite, and it's real, which is more than it used to be. Then, last Tuesday, around 10 in the morning, I came around the corner from the break room, and my daughter was standing at the dispatch desk by herself. No Colton, no car idling out front. She'd driven the 90 minutes on a weekday without telling me she was coming, which meant she'd risked getting turned right back around, something she has never once done in her life. There was the smallest curve just starting to show under a plain gray t-shirt. She wasn't holding anything. That's the part that stopped me, and I know how strange that sounds, but I'd spent 6 years watching that girl walk in with her arms full, a candle, a bottle of wine, a gift bag stuffed with tissue paper. This time, there was nothing in her hands at all. She'd made it as far as the desk and then just run clean out of plan. She didn't tell me I'd be fine. Said she hadn't brought anything. Said she didn't want anything. Then she asked, "Is there something I can do?" I stood there about 3 seconds, which at my age is a long time to spend not being useful. There was a stack of intake forms that needed sorting, and a phone ringing off the hook. So I reached along the wall, pulled over one of those gray plastic chairs, set it down at the end of the desk, and turned it a quarter out, toward the room. Nobody cried. Nobody gave a speech. Nothing about any of this is fixed. It's just a Tuesday. That chair was never the prize. It was only ever a chair, and it only ever meant anything the moment somebody sat down in it because they actually wanted to be in the room, and not because I'd been quietly paying the rent on that seat for years, without telling a soul. Including myself. That's my story. 35 years, one chair I finally stopped saving, and a standing transfer I turned off at midnight, with my thumb shaking on the button. If there's someone in your life you've been quietly paying to show up, you don't need to make a speech about it, and you don't need to burn anything down. Just stop the transfer, and see who's still standing there, 6 weeks later. If this one got to you, send it to someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.